I want to give God the worship He is due. I want Him to be seen in all I say and do. I want to praise Him for all He has done. I want to thank Him for the gift of His Son. I want to exalt God, express my gratitude by having a worshipful attitude. I want to please Him, remain in Him strong. I want to glorify Him with a heartfelt song. God, I want to give You the glory that You're due. I want all to know how much I worship You. Psalm 29:2 says, "Give unto the Lord the glory due His name. Worship the Lord in the beauty of holiness." So, as I said, the topic for this quarter is experiencing God. And we're focusing primarily on experiencing God through worship and through love. Today we're going to talk about worship. We connect and we experience with God as we bow before Him, as we get to know Him. And these experiences are for the goal of changing our life. We don't come into the presence of God with the goal of getting up and being different. We have examples in the Bible of people who experienced God and then they were changed, literally changed probably for the rest of their lives. Exodus 34 records Moses, the literal physical change in Moses when he came down from the mountain after having spent 40 days on the mountain with God receiving the law. Verses 29 and 30 say this, "Now so it was so when Moses came down from the mountain and the 2 tablets of the testimony were in Moses' hands, and when he came down from the mountain, that Moses did not know that the skin of his face shone while he talked with them. So when Aaron and all the children of Israel saw Moses, behold, the skin of his face shone, and they were afraid to come near him." Do you look different to a society? After we've been in the presence of God, do we look different? We should. There should be a rest, a peace. We shouldn't come away the same. When Isaiah met with God, when Isaiah experienced the presence of God, he was terrified. We read in Isaiah 6, "Woe is me, for I am undone, because I am a man of unclean lips, and I dwell in the midst of a people of unclean lips. For my eyes have seen the King, the Lord of hosts." But he was changed. Terrified, changed. Saul, Nicodemus, Peter, Zacchaeus, the Samaritan woman who met Jesus at the well. These people experienced God and they were changed. One of my favorite stories in the Bible is when Jesus healed the blind man. He was hauled into the presence, or to the Sanhedrin, and they're like grilling him and basically abusing him verbally. And he gets to the end, he finally says this, look, stop. He had explained it multiple times. Because look, this is what I know. This morning I was blind, tonight I'm not blind. God changed me. Jesus changed him. Mary Magdalene, possessed by 6 demons, healed because Jesus came into her life. She didn't walk away the same. Our presence with God should change us. My hope is that as we delve into this quarter, experiencing God, that we will come away different as we experience God, that we'll be different people. Not just different Christians, but different people, that God would instill in us something that changes our life. Very, very important. So today we're talking about worship. And there was a football coach. I had a football coach in high school. I played football in high school, but I always got into a game when we were 60 points ahead or behind. So it shows you the extent of my talent. I was on the practice squad. Here, you stand here and somebody will hit you. Okay, I can do that. But I had a coach, and he had an interesting philosophy on gaining and giving respect. He said, if you have a problem with somebody else, if you have particularly in relation to the team, if you have a problem with somebody on the team, fight with them. Just have a knockdown, bare-knuckle brawl, fist fight. If you beat him, he'll respect you. If he beats you, you'll respect him. That was his philosophy on gaining and giving respect. Now, I don't necessarily buy into that. I question the reliability of that, but you can take it for what it's worth. But the point is this: respect is born out of something. Respect is born, it comes out of something. Respect grows from a platform, from a foundation. People respect what they perceive as requiring respect. Now, I did not say people respect things that they perceive deserve respect. I said people respect things that require respect. You know, the illustration a moment ago, maybe I will respect that individual because I don't want to get beat up again. You know, maybe I'll respect that person or they'll respect me because neither one of us wants to deal with the negative consequences that could happen. Now, that's not deserving of respect. That's demanding, requiring respect. But it's still born out of something. You hit harder than me, or faster than me, or both. And so there's respect there. In that case, respect isn't deserved as much as demanded. However, there are examples of the fact that respect will grow out of a situation where someone deserves respect. And so when we talk about requiring and deserving, we shift that into the area of worship. We talk about worshiping God. Well, why do we worship God? What is it that causes us to worship God? The very nature of God demonstrates that He is worthy of worship. And as we seek to experience God through worship, my goal is to look at some of the reasons why we worship God. It's not just an arbitrary thing. I don't serve God. I don't worship God because that's what I was taught, or that's just because I've done all my life. I was raised in a home where God was always honored, and I went to a Christian college, and I went to a seminary. But that's not why I worship God. There's a foundation for my worship of God. And that's developed over time. That didn't just happen. There was a time that I worshiped God because my father made me go to church. I understand that. Things change. But as we dive into worship, and today we dive into worship, specifically worship of God, worship is born out of something. Worship comes from something. It grows from a foundation. People worship that which they realize deserves or requires worship. The problem is not everybody that gets worship or respect deserves it. So it's important to delineate, why do we worship Jesus? Why do we worship God? What is it that lays that foundation where worship of Him is valid? He deserves this. Not that He just gets it. No, God deserves this. Well, how do we know that? Well, Psalm 99 gives us some answers. Look at Psalm 99. We begin, the Lord reigns, let the people tremble. He dwells between the cherubim, let the earth be moved. The Lord is great in Zion. He is high above all the people. Let them praise your great and awesome name. He is holy. The king's strength also loves justice. You have established equity. You have executed justice and righteousness in Jacob. Exalt the Lord our God and worship at His footstool. He is holy. Moses and Aaron were among His priests, and Samuel was among those who called upon His name. They called upon the Lord, and He answered them. He spoke to them in the cloudy pillar. They kept His testimonies and the ordinances He gave them. You answered them, O Lord our God. You were with them. You were to them, God who forgives, though you took vengeance on their deeds. Exalt the Lord our God. Worship at His holy hill, for the Lord our God is holy. So, when we talk about a foundation, what is the foundation for worship? The Psalm 99 begins by declaring the power and the might of God. The word rage. Verses 1 and 2 say this, the Lord reigns, let the peoples tremble. He dwells between the cherubim, let the earth be moved. The Lord is great in Zion. He is high above all the peoples. Psalm 99 is what they call one of the enthronement psalms. Now, the number of enthronement psalms varies, depends on who you read, but they definitely include Psalm 47, 93, and then 95 through 99. But the enthronement psalms describe how creation reacts to the presence of God. When God appears, when God reveals Himself, how does creation respond? Enthronement psalms affirm God's kingly reign over all things. And the enthronement psalms are characterized by phrases like this. The Lord Most High is terrible, great King. He will subdue the nations. God reigns over the heathen, clothed in majesty. The Lord on high is mighty. Let the earth tremble. The Lord is high above his people. We worship God because he is powerful. He is all powerful. God is deserving of worship because he is infinitely more powerful than all. In verse 1, you have the word tremble. And it means to shake. I mean, literally to shake. Now, the cause of the shaking can be different things. It could be fear. It could be agitated. It could even be rage, anger and rage. But when God descends, people fear and become uncomfortable. If God were to walk into the room today in physical form, we would all suddenly become uncomfortable. Because he's God. Some even get angry. Psalm chapter 2 says this: Why do the nations rage and the people plot a vain thing? The kings of the earth set themselves, and the rulers take counsel together against the Lord and against his anointed, saying, Let us break their bonds in pieces and cast away their cords from us. And my favorite verse, He who sits in the heavens will laugh at them. The Lord holds them in derision. He doesn't even give them the time of day. And the word rage in Psalm 2:1 and the word tremble in Psalm 99:1 come from the same Greek root. It's the same word. It's not the same word, but it's the same Greek word. When God appears in power, the world reacts. Some in worship, some in fear, some in rage and anger, but nobody in apathy. We are changed by the presence and the power of God. We worship God because he is powerful. But that's not the only reason. And in reality, if that were the only reason, it might not be enough. I mean, there are people that would come against, there are people that come against that anyway. But if you look at Psalm 99, verses 3, 5, and 9 give us another reason we worship God. And really, this reason, I believe, is the foundation of his power. But it says in verse 3, let them praise your great and awesome name. He is holy. Verse 5, exalt the Lord our God, worship at his footstool. He is holy. Exalt the Lord our God and worship at his holy hill, for the Lord our God is holy. See, it's not just about power. It's not just about the fact that he can beat the daylights out if he felt like it. It's about the fact that God lives in holiness. God doesn't just act, doesn't just do holiness. He is holy. Worship a God that is holy. He is sacred, set apart, awe-inspiring, morally flawless, eternally constant. He radiates perfection, moral perfection in every area. God's power emanates from a holy character that does no wrong and is therefore deserving of worship. He's not arbitrary in his power, but his power comes from his holiness. It's grounded in his holiness. There are a lot of earthly dictators that achieve a degree of worship because they rule with an iron fist. Stop free speech, control people, hold power with harsh, strict laws, even cruel methods. Stalin, Pinochet, Diaz, Mussolini are among those who demanded allegiance through brutal tactics. There's a book, it's in my office. I can't read it. I've started it. It's actually not even mine. It was loaned to me. It's called Bloodlands, Europe between Hitler and Stalin. And it's really a very difficult read, a historical study focusing on the deliberate, and I emphasize some words, the deliberate mass murder of 14 million civilians by Stalin between 1933 and 1945. Focuses on the regions of Poland, Ukraine, Belarus, the Baltic states, and then Western Russia. And the author, Thomas Snyder, highlights the deaths of 14 million non-combatants caused by deliberate policies like mass shootings, planned famines, extermination camps. When I finally had to put the book up, I couldn't read anymore. Stalin would send his men in right at the harvest, and they would literally take everything, every kernel of grain, every animal, every piece of wood that could be used for heat. They would literally take everything, and the villages would die of starvation. And that was Stalin's plan. Now, do you think these villagers respected when they saw the armies coming? Absolutely. They got out of the way. They bowed down. But not because Stalin and the armies deserved it. Because they weren't acting out of holiness. They weren't acting out of kindness. These dictators received allegiance, but not because they deserved it. Worship of God is born not out of His power, not out of fear, but out of His holiness. Yeah, He is powerful. But beyond that, He is infinitely holy. He never does wrong, ever. And I read and I watch Facebook Reels and I read articles, people screaming and hollering about, well, God did this. And lately I've seen a lot of people attacking the Scriptures. And sometimes I read them and listen to them, and sometimes I don't. Just depends on my mood. But it doesn't matter what people say. God acts in holiness all the time. And so therefore I don't mind His power. I welcome His power. Now, we have to address verse 8. Look at verse 8. It says this, "You answered them, O Lord our God. You were to them God who forgives, though you took vengeance on their deeds." Though you took vengeance on their deeds. And questions arise concerning God's dealing with rebellious people. There are examples in the Bible, many examples, of entire nations being destroyed by God. And there are even examples of Israelites who were completely destroyed by God. There were times when the ground literally opened up, masses of people fell in, and then the ground closed. How do we deal with that? But questions about these, or the problem is questions about these come out of the misconceptions concerning punishment and justice. All sin brings punishment. Get that in your head. All sin brings punishment. And you know who suffers the most because of our sin? Innocent people. Do you think the child abuser suffers more than the child? No. All sin brings punishment. We think we can cheat on God. We think we can fudge on His law. We think we can do all these things. No. We will suffer for those things eventually, or somebody will. All sin brings punishment. However, some sin brings horrible and brutal punishment. As the verse states, sometimes justice demands severe punishment, including death. And the reason, you look in the Scriptures, you look in the Bible, and you realize that, some nations did completely get wiped out. Sometimes Israel lost thousands of people because rebellion against God is horrible. And sometimes the punishment was death. The thing is this, our justice system is filled with flaws. Even Chuck Colson, whom I admire, is not with us anymore, but whom I admire, even he said, there are innocent people on death row, there are innocent people in prison. Because our system is flawed. It makes mistakes. God's is not. God's is not flawed. God doesn't make mistakes with justice. Our justice system makes mistakes. God does not. We may not like it, but sometimes true justice is harsh. God is holy. God is morally perfect. God is also just, which we'll get into in a minute. So, I realize verse 8, you were to them the God who forgives, but you took vengeance on their deeds, because figure it out. Sin is harsh, and punishment should be harsh. We worship God because He is holy. Moving on, we learn that we worship God because He is just. Verse 4, the king's strength also loves justice. You have established equity. You have executed justice and righteousness in Jacob. If you look at that verse 4, the verse screams justice 3 times, 3 ways. First of all, it uses the word justice twice. The king's strength also loves justice, and you have executed justice. We worship a God who administers law in the correct way. We worship God who carries out law in the right way. We worship God who does things the right way. He is just. Second, the psalmist says, you've established equity. God administers law equally to everyone. I think this is probably one of the screaming points in our country today. That's not fair. You treat this group differently than that group. The idea in Scripture gathers the idea of straightness, levelness, equity, integrity. It is in some places in Hebrew used to describe the terrain, literally a physical terrain. This is smooth. This is easy going. This is easy travel. From a judicial point of view, it talks about a decision that is untainted by partiality, moral conduct free of crooked motives. The term consistently points to something that is unbent, that is even, that is right. He is equal. Ethnicity, gender, orientation, economic status, job status, family connections do not change how God dispenses justice. We're all judged equally. We worship God because He is morally and perfectly impartial. If only our justice system could say the same thing. If only we could say the same thing. Do we sometimes look at somebody and go, ooh. God doesn't do that. Third, the psalmist in Psalm 99 screams out, you have executed righteousness in Jacob. God does everything, and God does the right thing. We may not like it. We may not agree with it. But God always does right, the right thing. Not only in the right way, not only without bias, but He does the right thing. Our courts don't act like that. If our society treated everybody the same, if we treated everybody right, things would be a lot better. And unfortunately, oftentimes people are treated poorly or in the wrong way for things they can't control. Ethnicity, other things as well. But not God. He is perfectly just. Perfectly right. So 3 ways: just, equal, and right. That's why God deserves worship. Considering the last 2 things, holiness and justice, ask myself, what's the difference between holiness and justice? Came up with this. Holiness is an internal state of moral purity being set apart. So holiness is an internal state. Justice is an active practice of holiness. That which is inside comes out as justice. So holiness is an internal state of moral purity. Justice is an active practice of fairness and right treatment in relationships. Also, holiness focuses on who God is, whereas justice focuses on how that quality is applied in action. Well, this is who God is, and this is what God does. Holiness, justice. And I like that definition. It's nice and neat. We all, I like nice, neat things. But there's a problem. In describing God as holy, the psalmist uses an adjective, a Hebrew adjective. God is holy. It's a descriptive term. But in verse 4, when the psalmist describes God as justice and righteousness, he uses 2 Hebrew nouns. He uses nouns. So, wait a minute. God is just. That means that's who He is. That's a descriptive. God is holy. God is right. That's a descriptive. No, they're nouns. So what does that tell us? It's not telling us that God acts in holiness or acts in righteousness. It's telling us that God is holiness. His very nature is holiness. His very nature is righteousness. Why do I worship God? Why do I bow and worship? It's because God is holiness. He is righteousness. Now, we can also go off on the rabbit trail and say he also acts in those ways, but that's not what Psalm 99 is telling us. What Psalm 99 is telling us is, here is a God who is these things. What is my foundation for worship? Well, part of that foundation is that God is. Now, I want to say this. And I had to correct this in my notes constantly this week. I wanted to say this. The God that I serve is. No. God is. It's not the God that I serve. It is the God that I serve. But the problem with that is, well, then what about the God that you serve? What about the God that somebody else serves? No. There's only one. There's only one. So, I want to state this that way. God is holiness. God is righteousness. What's the foundation of my worship? It's because God is that. And I'm so grateful that I serve a God. Worship is born out of a foundation. Worship grows from a God who is powerful, holy, and righteous. Jesus said to the woman at the well, "You worship what you do not know. We know what we worship, for salvation is of the Jews." Joshua said, "Choose you this day whom you will serve." I say to you today, choose you today who you will worship. Because you will worship somebody or something. Make a choice. We got to turn those off. Choose you this day whom we will serve. God is the safe choice. Now, He's not the easy choice. He's not the popular choice. But He is the right choice. Verse 9 says, "Exalt the Lord our God. Worship at His holy hill. For the Lord our God is holy." Let's pray. Father,